This is a prayer, the reading from Isaiah that spoke to many of us in our discernment to go to El Paso. So I'd invite you to open your hands and put them on your lap or your desk or whatever is convenient, and close your eyes and just take a deep breath. And pray this prayer of Isaiah and with all of us. Here I am, send me. Actually, that's the prayer of discernment. We're called and we're sent. And our discernment, no matter whether it's to go the border, whether it's continue a lifestyle, consider a lifestyle or a ministry, our desire is to go where the call is great and we are needed, to be called and sent by God. And so we say this prayer. Let's say this together, and you can keep your mics off. Here I am, send me. Okay, I'm going to give this to Mary, who will begin our sharing today.
Okay, I'm Mary, and sister, like Sister June said, Sister Joy and Margie and I will tell you a little bit about our experience from El Paso and with the refugees. And then after we share, we'll have some time to have questions if you have any. But if you have any dying questions in between, feel free to ask. I live in Houston with my mom, who I'm caring for right now. I moved here in 2018. And I went to El Paso a little bit at the end of Christmas in December and the beginning of January. At that time, I don't know if you remember, but on the news, there was a lot of coverage about children being kept in cages and they're being separated from their families. Legislations were coming out that I thought were very inhumane. And so there was a call out from our community saying if we wanted to come and help. And so I just thought that this was a great opportunity to go and do something about it, because I was tired of hearing all of the negativity that was in the media. And so this is what inspired me. And we always say we respond to the times, and this was the time to say yes and put some action after our prayers. So I went with Sister Imelda, who in this picture is on the left, and then Sister Barbara, and that's another volunteer that wasn't with us, and Sister Rosarita and Sister Doris, who's not in the picture, came too. Sister Rosarita and Sister Doris spoke English or Spanish, so they were able to translate, and the rest of the group didn't know any Spanish, so we did a lot of cooking and cleaning and organizing. That picture, can you go back? That picture, we were cooking breakfast. We were at the pastoral center, where it took in people who a father or a mother, and they had to have a child to go through our facility. And we always cooked we were there for 2 weeks, and we always cooked breakfast, and most of the time we made lunch. But if they had a group of people who came to volunteer to serve lunch and bring food in, they were always serving, and we would clean up afterwards. So we were cooking breakfast here, and then the people would come. We always had cereal, oatmeal, fruit, and a protein, and of course bread. People love bread. They always ask for bread. So we always had those out for people. You can go to the next slide. Sister Doris and Sister Rosarita, here they were doing the intake. So when people came, the refugees came through, Rosarita and Doris would always call to get a hold of family members so that they could come and pick them up, do flight arrangements or by bus, or if the family came to the center, they would pick them up by that. So the picture showing they were doing some translation, trying to get the information so that we can connect the families to their families in the US. And then this next picture is, we made lots of sandwiches to go. We made like hundreds of them each day because these were gonna be put in these care packages. You can switch to the next slide. I think those are the care packages yeah. So these red bags would have these sandwiches in there, snacks on the left, you could see the snacks, water bottles. So we had to decide when they were gonna go, or we had to know where they were gonna go and then decide how many days it would take them to get to their place. And then we knew how much food to put in each package. It had to be enough for the dad or the mom and then the child. And a lot of times we put in blankets in there because during that time, it was very cold. It was in the winter, and the people who are the refugees didn't have a lot of clothes on them. A lot of them came with just a sweater, a shirt, and then socks, and a lot of times shoes that weren't even appropriate for winter. So when they came through the center, we always gave them clothes to take with them. This next picture is some of the sisters, and then this family came from St. Louis. They were on their, I think, vacation, Christmas vacation. So the parents said, come down and help. So the two young men here are from Guatemala and they're adopted. And then the mom is, I think she was raised in Brazil, and the dad is from Ireland. So one of the boys, they were there for a week when we were there. So one of the boys was like, we're an immigrant family too. I'm like, yeah, we all are. You know, they were very fun to be around. Some of the things I did there, or I saw, was when people were coming through the center, they were sick. We had people who, it was the winter, so a lot of people had the flu, diarrhea, vomiting. So I'm a germaphobe, so I went around to sanitize everything. We sent people to the hospital because they had fevers. So it was really bad. And then the sisters also, a lot of the volunteers who came through got sick. Luckily, I didn't get sick because I swear to this. So maybe you want to try this too yourself, to drink ginger tea. I swear by it. You won't get sick with it. But a lot of people got sick going through. Let me see. You can go to the next slide. On our day off, we were able to go to anywhere we wanted to. This was a Tuesday, was our day off. So we went to the tent city. And this is where the kids were separated from the parent. And this is where they were housed in these tents and cages. And so I think the week before, there was a protest there, and you could see the pictures. One of the local artists made flowers for all of the kids that went through this, the tent city. And so the picture below was, we went there, and there were some people who were reporters who were staying there for months, and they were in their RVs or their vans staying in there to report back to the media what was going on. So they made like a little shrine there. And what we were doing is, when we were there, the police made the lady who was in charge move everything back there was a line that they had where it's the federal line and then the state line. And so if they didn't move it back to the state line, then everything would be thrown away. So we were just helping them take down the flowers, take down all of their stuff to bring it over to the state line. And then the police were very helpful. Because there were flowers in way up high, so we couldn't reach it. So there was a lot of tall guys in the group, so they helped bring everything over. So they were very kind. And then we cleaned up and helped clean up and everything. So you could see some of the flowers there. And the water bottles back there, they put it in the middle of the road so that it would block some of the activity that was going on, so the trucks couldn't go through. So that was their protest. And the officials were very upset and angry with that. But it was a big ordeal the week before, but we missed that protest. During this time, they said that it was towards the end because they were breaking down the tents because they were dispersing the kids, because I think there was a lot of negative media. So they were dispersing the kids because the guy who was staying there said that that week they had seen a lot of activity go, like big trucks bring things out from the area. And then I think that's the end of, and there's some more. So it was very sad to see all of that. Some of the things that I did in the center was we did a lot of cooking and cleaning since we didn't know the language. And some of the things that I learned was that language is a universal. We spoke with our hands a lot. And I used Google Translator to try to find out what our guests wanted. And a lot of times Google Translator didn't work because, like, one guy, he wanted some soap to wash his clothes, and I understood ropa is clothes, but he talked so fast, and in the Google Translator, it didn't pick it up. So we had to do like show and tell, like he had to go around and point to everything that he wanted, and sometimes he couldn't find it, so we had to like do hand gestures. He took me around to show me things. So that was one of the difficult things. Is I wish I knew Spanish so that we could help them better and understand. But even though I didn't know the language, there was a lot of connections because it was fun trying to figure out what people were saying. And then, let's say, another learning is that I found through the gestures from the parent, they were telling me that they were trying to escape their country because of the violence that was there. And so, like, my parents came here in '75 to escape the Vietnam War. And so it was just very touching to hear some of their stories about their sacrifices that the parent was willing to make for their child. Some of them walked for months to get to the border to come over here with their kids. Some of the kids who came through were barely 6 months old. I mean, I think that was the youngest, was 6 months old, and they took the kids here on their backs, leaving everything, their family behind, leaving their homes, everything they knew. They came over, sacrificing everything. And some people, as you know, didn't make it, died along the way. So just the sacrifice to have a chance of life for their kid, that's what really touched me while I was working with them. And also their generosity. And I found that the people who were going through were very gracious, and like, they were always positive. They were always happy and very grateful for anything we gave them, anything they were experiencing. They were very happy and grateful. So that's what I learned. Okay, so that's That's what I learned. So Joy, can you share your experience? You're off.
Thank you, Mary. We need the next slide. There you go. Stop there. No, go back to the one you had right before that. There you go. Like Mary, I heard the call from our leadership team asking for people being willing to go to the border. And typically, I haven't been able to do things like that for lengths of time because of my full-time ministry. But I was in between ministries at this time, so that wasn't the reason I couldn't go. But I said, I can't speak Spanish. And the sister that invited us said, you can cook and you can clean and you can drive. And when I was a young sister, we had a motivational speaker, and this is what she made us memorize. I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. That was such a motivator for me because the problem is enormous and you can feel overwhelmed by it. But I could do something, and that's what I wanted to do. I went with, next slide. These are the people that went with me. Sister Nora Guy is on the left. Associate Joanna McGee is on the right, and I'm in the center. Nora came from Boston, Joanna came from New Orleans, and I came from Columbus. We went in February. Mary, I believe, went in December. It wasn't quite as cold as she experienced, but it was cold enough. And for people coming from the Southern Hemisphere, what we would consider warm was cold. The next slide. This is where we worked. If you look on the left, the Central San Juan Diego is where we worked. And what I found, one of the things I found moving were these two sisters on the right. One is 84 and one's 87. They didn't let their limitation of age deter them from making a contribution. They made a huge contribution. Of course, they were bilingual, but I was so inspired by their stories and working side by side with them. So it again, what I can do, I will do, and they could, and they did. And then the next slide, like Mary, we were put in the kitchen because we weren't Spanish speaking. And you see us preparing breakfast. Now ours moved from breakfast to lunch, which was another huge thing, because we'd have to go shopping and then figure out what was in the kitchen to use and feed like 50. I was used to feeding 12, but not 50. And so we either made breakfast or lunch. And if you have the next slide, please. These women on the left, this was very moving to me. They were volunteers and they came in every day to make a huge pot of soup, because when the people arrived on these buses, the first thing they did is they brought them in and they gave them soup, because many of them hadn't had anything to eat yet, or if they did, they only had a frozen burrito. So they were very hungry, and they were going to feed them more substantially later, but they wanted to get something in their stomach. Slide, please. So they came into this room, which was a cafeteria, and you probably can't see the person way at the end standing, but she did an orientation. And one of the most moving things to me is she'd say, how many people are from Guatemala? And they'd raise their hands and we'd all cheer. And how many people are from Honduras? We'd all cheer. And what it was, sometimes if you were from Guatemala, you didn't know who else was from Guatemala. So it kind of connected them up. And it had an opportunity to talk about how beautiful their country was. And then she gave them instructions of what was going to happen next, which was the intake that Mary talked about, contacting their families. And then they were going to, after they had their soup, then they were going to go over to the clothing store and pick out something to wear. And then they were going to get a fresh towel and some soap, and they got a hot shower. I'm telling you, the hot shower was a hit. They hadn't showered for however long, and they were thrilled to be able to get a hot shower and then put on fresh clothes. That was enormous. Meanwhile, the people calling the families, making connections, once they knew the family got the ticket for them to either fly or take the bus, we began fixing their go-to bags, which Mary showed you in the earlier picture. One of the things, the next slide, this was the thing that broke my heart. These are GPS, and they have to wear if you look at the top left, they have to wear that on their ankle so that the Border Patrol knows where they are at all times. And then below it, you have to charge it. And one day, an alarm went off because the person hadn't had a chance to charge his GPS. And so he was being notified, you better get that charged so we can keep track of you. On the right, the gentleman only had a pair of boots, and the GPS didn't fit over it. So they had to cut the boot out so he could wear the GPS on his ankle. Now, you can imagine what that was like to walk in that, to have your good only shoes cut open for a GPS. That was really hard. Next slide. Now, this is the intake we had, and on the bulletin board on the right were the family, how many people were in the family, when they were leaving, where they were going, so that when we made the go-to bags, or the bags that we were going to send with them, we knew what to pack in it. We knew how much to pack in it. If it was a child, like Mary said, you put a blanket in there if you had one, or a toy. And if they were on the bus, you gave them bottles of water. If they were on a plane, of course, you couldn't give them water because they couldn't get through security. So you gave them an empty bottle and tried to explain why it was empty and how to get it in another language, which was challenging. The next slide was the babies. There were so many babies. And one of the things I learned was how tender everybody was with the children. It didn't matter if it was your child or somebody else's child. And the myth in the media was some of the men were taking children across the border so they'd have a better chance of getting into the States. But if you saw the gentleman I saw holding their children, you'd know there was a deep relationship there. They weren't using the children. There was affection and care and love between them. The next, this is a clothing room. We sorted and washed and sorted because when they'd come through, they'd go through the pile to find theirs, and they wouldn't always fold it up and put it back. So we were constantly doing that, and people were so generous with giving us items that people could use. In fact, there's one jacket, and I don't think I have a picture of it. It's a kind of a heavy jacket, and it was in multiple sizes. And one corporation donated 10,000 of them. The kids, especially the teenagers, loved those jackets. And when I was leaving from the airport, I saw about 4 of those jackets going around, so I knew where they had come from. We made, as Mary said, hundreds of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so many that I don't think I'll ever eat one again. But this is what we gave them when they were leaving. And each person got 3 sandwiches per day they're gone, per person. So that's why you had to know the numbers. Okay, next slide. Okay, if you look on the left side toward the back, the person with the blue t-shirt, that was Joanna, the associate that you met early on. And by accident, somebody said, "What do you do?" And she said, "Well, I'm a nurse." Well, she got the role. And she kept saying, "I'm a geriatric nurse. I'm not a pediatrician." It didn't matter because she understood and she had the compassion of a nurse, and she knew when the person needed to go to the emergency room, and she knew when an aspirin would take care of it. She had enough sense to know that. And we were very blessed that a doctor would come every other day and say to her, "Do you have anybody for me to check?" Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And sometimes he would say, "Take this person to my clinic. I'm going to call ahead and they'll be waiting for you." Now, I was able to drive some people to the clinic. They could not have been more compassionate. They knew people didn't have money and they gave them medicine anyway. So, you know, people were wonderful. If we went to the emergency room, they were prepared for this and they were very compassionate. Now, they didn't always get in right away because other people were there, but, you know, that's a contribution you could make. And of course, children, if they're sick, if you give them the right medicine, they can turn around pretty fast. And here on the right, you can see people that washed their clothes out when they got there. They got new clothes, but if they wanted to take the clothes that they had and wash them themselves, they could do that. And of course, it was hot, and they could hang them on the line and take it with them if they wanted. Some people didn't want to do that, but they had that. Next slide. And this is, of course, the center where we worked. I think what I learned was, like Mary said, I didn't think I didn't have Spanish, and I tried Google Translate too, but there was something about the affection and the care you had among each other that went over language. It was, they were very motivated to bring their children and their family to the United States. In fact, one of the Marino sisters who was bilingual asked this woman from Brazil, "Why did you come here? You have free education and free health care." And she said, "I want freedom." And because her son, her young adult son, had been taken because she was a professor. She had 2 master's degrees. She taught in the university. And her son was taken because she spoke against the government. So she wanted to come to be free. That broke my heart. And that was one of the instances where language didn't matter. It was a connection of the heart. And like Mary said, they were grateful for anything. Anything you did, they were grateful for. Nobody pushed. And, you know, when you're hungry, sometimes you want to get at the front of the line. But nobody pushed. They all said, "Thank you." You know, we'd say, "You can come back." They loved the bread. "You could come back and have more. Whatever we have is yours. Whatever you put out is yours." And they were most grateful. And they did the dishes. They washed the tables. They did the floors. They wanted to participate to make it helpful. And the other thing, I was so pleased that I learned a little Spanish, and now I've forgotten it. But when I would take the families over to the clothing store, which was across the street, and I would ask them in Spanish, "Where are you from?" And they would say, "Guatemala, Honduras." And I would say, "Oh, it's a beautiful country." Little tears would come down their face. I mean, they were just so moved, so grateful. And I was really grateful to have a couple of moments where I could be particularly helpful, like picking out clothes for them or having that little conversation. So I think I'm going to circle back to the quote I started with. "I'm only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do." It was a little bit that I could do. It made a big difference to me, and I assume it made a difference to them. I don't ever want to be paralyzed by what is so enormous that I don't know what to do. I can do something. So I know after Margie finishes, we're going to offer you the opportunity to ask any of us questions. So I'm going to hand this over to Margie.
Next slide. Actually, okay. The first slide I had was, I think was, yeah, there I am. Okay. Okay, well, here we are. I'm Sister Margie. I'm actually in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a mission group coordinator for our community, which basically is a leadership position. And I basically am the advocate and support person, I guess, for the people in my mission group. And I have about 85 sisters that I am there for, trying to help them through any kind of issue they may have. They want to move, if they want to have a different ministry, or if they have any health concerns. So I love my job because I really get to know all the sisters in a personal way. So that's what I do. But now back again, that slide. I'm sorry, June. And my voice, I apologize for my voice. I have a vocal cord issue, but I'm not sick. But anyway, this is the group that I went with. And it's the Ohio Dominican University, which is our sponsoring institution. And between 2013 and 2018, I was a director of campus ministry at Ohio Dominican. And Amy, who is in the yellow dress, is an associate in our community. And she and I, every year that I was at Ohio Dominican, we would take a group of students to different volunteer opportunities. And the one year we took a group of students to Guatemala. And then the other 3 years, we took a group to Haiti, and we had a medical mission there. But the last year I was there, it had to be canceled because of the political crisis that was going on there. So, and it was at that time that we found out about all the problems they were having at the border and the immigration policies that were going on. And so we decided this past year, because Amy had heard from annual breakfast meeting we had here in the Columbus with the Bishop Campbell, Sister Norma Pimentel. She is a executive director of Catholic Charities in the Rio Grande Valley. She came and spoke and gave a presentation about the border, about what was going on at the border, about all the services that Catholic Charities provides, and the resources. And she's a missionary, sister of Missionary of Jesus. And so based on her presentation, Amy and I decided to contact her, and we arranged an opportunity to invite the students to have this experience working with her and at the community respite center that she has in McAllen, Texas, and also in Brownsville. So the next slide. So that's what we did. We went down, and the picture on the left is in McAllen, Texas. And it's where, like Mary and Joy, it was a community respite center where the asylum seekers would come, and they would again provide the services that the other respite centers have done. They provide food, they provide clothing, they also provide shelter until the sponsor can come and make arrangements to get them transported to where they will be going with their family members. But what was going on when we were there, which was pretty much the second week in March of this year, President Trump had changed the policy where the asylum seekers were not able to come over to the US. They had to stay in Mexico and wait until they had their court hearing, which obviously there were still a few people that were able to come over from Kenya and different countries, but no one from Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras. But here, the staff volunteer was giving us an orientation for all week. And on the right, you will see all the different cosmetics and toiletries that they have for all the people that came. Okay, next slide. And here we are the next day, and every day there are volunteers, regular volunteers that come every day to begin to organize and pack all the different donations that people have given that are sent over across the border to Tent City, which you will see in a minute. But this is beans, obviously water. There's big bag of flour and oil and rice and all these things. We spent all day putting them together. And then the next slide. And of course, then the next day, we packed everything in these trucks, and it not only include all the food, but it also include all the toiletry items, it all had cleaning supplies, everything that was needed for the people that live in Tent City to not only be able to really feed their families and actually cook for their families, but they also were able to, you know, make their home as clean and tidy as they could, and to try to keep them safe with everything going on in our world. And here we are, excuse me, these are the bags or the big carts that we used to cross the border. And they were pretty heavy, and we had to walk a mile with these bags, with these tents, not tents, with the carts. And here you see, there's a gentleman there. I don't know if you can see it because my pictures are on the right there, but there's a picture there of an older man, and he's retired, and he does this 3 times a week. And he's in his 80s, but they have these volunteers that are just so committed and so passionate to try to provide what they can for the people and to treat them with respect and dignity and love. And so anyway, so this is where we were at. So this was the beginning. We had to cross the border. Next slide. And here we are. But when we actually crossed the border, the first thing we saw, which I don't have a picture of, is a huge fence. And the fence, over the fence, they were just tons and tons of tents. And little kids were right by the fence, you know, looking at us and waving at all the other, you could see all the other men and women and families mingling around. And it was just an overwhelming sight to see that. And then, of course, then when we go into the front and we enter in, this is what you saw. And, you know, there's a clotheslines, you know, because the people are trying to make a daily life for themselves. You know, they're washing their clothes, they're hanging them out. They've made in front of their tent a little cooking space. You know, they have, you know, they do have phones, you know, that kind of thing, because it's still important to keep in contact with people. And so, next slide. And so here they are, the women here, that was provided, the little washing station. And there they were washing their clothes and their dishes, and again, putting them out on the clothesline. And here's this little boy, and he's helping his family with doing the wringer, you know, wringing the clothes and stuff. And so, and they were so generous, and they were so happy to see us, just that we cared for them. So anyway, so next slide. This is a picture, and this is sort of a video, which I'm happy it came out. It sort of gives you an overview. And back, this right here is where we had all the bags, and everyone was waiting in line all the way around to get their bag, which would be about, it would contain about 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks of food for the family. And they also had a table on the other side where it had all kinds of toiletries, diapers, just and cleaning supplies. Okay, next slide. Well, actually, before I get into this, I want to also say back in Tent City, we were there for about 2 hours. And so Amy and I decided we wanted to just walk around. And we really weren't supposed to because, you know, they said, well, it's not safe and that kind of thing. But Amy and I are sort of rebels. And so we decided to do it anyway. So we walked around and, you know, the people were very gracious. They came out and said hello. And it was just good to see the whole area. And of course, they have porta potties and they have a little place where the kids can wash their hands. And all this stuff has been donated. This is nothing that has been given to them by the government or the city of Matamoros or anything. This was all donations from not only Catholic Charities, but a lot of other nonprofit organizations. So people have really gone out of their way. And when we walked around, we saw the World Health Organization. They had a booth there helping them, helping the people. They had doctors across borders, but they're all here until they have their court hearing, which can take months and months and months. And then what we heard was that normally when they do have the court hearing, which is in one great big tent, evidently, it's all like Zoom or whatever. And normally they are denied. And then if they appeal it, they're usually denied again. And so it's like, you know, you can just try to imagine what that's like, this sense of, you know, where are we going to go? And these have, you know, all the children and the families, but they keep on having hope because they don't want to go back because of the danger and the violence that they have experienced in their own countries. Okay, next slide. Now this is Sister Norma on the left, and this is the Rio Grande that you see behind her. And Rio Grande is basically the dividing line between the US and Mexico. And Sister Norma was basically sharing about all the services that they provide there for the people and all the problems that they have trying to provide the sources that they need and trying to deal with the government and trying to make changes. And of course, this is the border wall that you've heard so much about. Next picture. And this is just another bigger picture of the border wall, and there's a border patrol there. And we did have a chance to talk to the border patrol guy, and you know, he recognizes the problems, but he also, you know, has to follow the rules and that kind of thing. So we really need to pray and really work to change the immigration policies that have been formulated. And it's really unfair and unjust. Next slide. Now this is our group, and this is Wade. And Wade is basically the person, he's a staff person at Catholic Charities. And he is absolutely wonderful. And he was actually from New Jersey, but he's also an immigrant. But he came here, I don't know how long he's been there with Catholic Charities, but he goes every day across the border to the tent city. And everyone seems to know him. They all really have a trust in him. And he's the one that coordinated all the tents, and he's still getting tents. And what I've noticed, I did a little research lately, and he's still continuing to do that. And there are other organizations that are still providing tents. And the situation is pretty bad there because of the coronavirus. And and what's happening now is that they've stopped the court hearings because of the virus. And so now what's happening is that some of the parents and the kids are getting sick. And so what's happening is that some of the parents then, because of desperation, they're having their kids cross the border by themselves because they know that then the Border Patrol will take them to the US, to the detention center, and then eventually to foster homes. So and they're doing it because they're desperate, because otherwise their children are gonna die. And so that was really distressing when I read that this morning. And so anyway, that sort of has been my experience. And the next picture, This was a group that was Witness for Protection, yeah. And they were right at the border, and they were obviously protesting what was going on there. And they had been protesting there for like 100 some days. And they were the ones who was telling us that they would go to the airport. Next slide. They would go to the airport, and early in the morning, this would happen. And they would go and take pictures of them sending the people back that were being deported. And they would be led up, even the little kids, in the steps up to the door in shackles. And and that is still happening. And they usually do it in the morning, and that's the reason why these are called death flights. And I don't want to end there because it's so sad. But on the other hand, I feel like we need to know what's going on so that we can somehow do what we can to make our government do something to change the immigration process, because we're all immigrants. And I guess what I learned is that no matter why they come, we need to welcome them, we need to help them, we need to be able to give them a better life. And so, and it was very moving for the students. They were a wonderful group of students. And so anyway, so that's my story.
Thank you very much, Margie and Joy and Mary, for helping us understand a little bit more about the situation at our southern border.